Title: Sunlit Rebellion. The neighborhood of Pinewood Estates lay shrouded in darkness, a quiet suburban sprawl swallowed by the night. Streetlights flickered out, windows went black, and the hum of air conditioners fell silent. Except for my house. It stood defiant, a lighthouse in the void, every bulb blazing with a fierce, unapologetic glow. Across the street, Lydia Harper, the self-proclaimed queen of the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association, paced her porch in a pink robe, clutching a flashlight like it was her last tether to civilization. Her voice cut through the stillness, shrill and furious, as she barked into her phone. I didn't need to hear the words to know she was begging the power company for help. Help that wouldn't come. Not tonight. Not ever. Because I own the company. It all started 3 months ago, back in December 2024, when I decided I'd had enough of the electric bills that climbed higher each month like some cruel, unending staircase. I'm Nathan Brooks, a guy who likes his independence, and the idea of relying on Pinewood power forever grated on me. So I did what any sensible person would. I bought solar panels. Big, sleek, efficient ones, mounted right on my roof. The installer promised they'd cut my costs by half and keep me off the grid when I needed it. Simple, right? Not when you live in a neighborhood ruled by an HOA with the iron grip of a medieval tyrant, and a president named Lydia Harper who'd made control her life's mission. I knew trouble was coming the moment those panels went up. 3 days later, it arrived in my mailbox, a letter so smug I could practically hear Lydia's voice dictating it. Dear homeowner, it has come to the attention of the Pinewood Estates HOA that your recent installation of solar panels violates our community aesthetic standards. You are hereby ordered to remove them within 14 days or face a fine of $500 per day until compliance is met. I stood there, staring at the words, half laughing, half fuming. Aesthetic standards? This was the same neighborhood where Mrs. Delaney still had a garden gnome from the Nixon era, its chipped paint peeling like a bad sunburn. But solar panels, clean, modern, functional, those were the problem? I tried the diplomatic route first. I'm not unreasonable. The next HOA meeting was a week later, held in the community center's drab conference room, the kind of place that smelled like stale coffee and regret. I walked in, expecting a discussion, maybe even a compromise. Big mistake. Lydia sat at the head of the table, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her smile so condescending it could have curdled milk. The other board members, 5 of them, all spineless, flanked her like a royal guard too afraid to mutter a word. Mr. Brooks, she said, lacing her fingers together as I took a seat. I assume you're here to discuss your violation. I kept my cool, leaning back in the chair. I wouldn't call it a violation, Lydia. I installed solar panels to save money and go green. They're legal, permitted, and paid for. What's the issue? She sighed, the way a teacher might at a kid who'd forgotten his homework for the 10th time. Legal doesn't mean acceptable, Nathan. The HOA has strict guidelines to maintain property values. Solar panels make the neighborhood look industrial. I glanced around the room. Most of the board avoided my eyes, staring at their notepads or the flickering fluorescent lights. Industrial, I said, raising an eyebrow. That's rich. You approved Tom Reynolds' 10-foot flamingo statue last summer. That thing's a neon eyesore, but my panels are the problem. Her smile twitched, just a hair. That was different. It was an art installation. It's a flamingo, Lydia. A flamingo with a light-up beak. My panels actually do something useful. The room stayed silent, the air thick with tension. Lydia leaned forward, her voice dropping to that fake sweet tone she used when she thought she'd already won. The point, Nathan, is that we have rules. Rules you agreed to when you moved here. If everyone started slapping panels on their roofs, we'd look like a factory district. And if everyone put up flamingos, we'd look like a bad theme park, I shot back. But fine, let's talk rules. Show me where in the bylaws it says solar panels are banned. She hesitated, just for a second, then waved a hand dismissively. It's about the spirit of the community, not the letter of the law. The board agrees with me. I looked at the others, Mike from down the street, Susan with her perpetual frown, the rest of them. Not one met my gaze. They were terrified of her, or maybe just too lazy to care. The meeting dragged on for another 20 minutes, but it was clear from the start. Lydia wasn't budging, and the board was her puppet show. By the end, I had 2 options. take down my panels, or start paying a fine that'd bankrupt me in a month. I left without saying another word, already plotting option 3. Back home, I stared at those panels glinting in the winter sun, a quiet rebellion against the HOA's nonsense. I'd spent years building my stake in Pinewood Power, starting as a junior exec and clawing my way up to majority owner. It wasn't public knowledge. Why would it be? But it gave me leverage most people didn't have. Lydia wanted a fight? She'd get one. I just had to wait for the right moment. The fine started a week later, $500 a day, piling up like snow in a blizzard. Letters flooded my mailbox, each one more threatening than the last. Final notice. Immediate action required. I ignored them all, letting the total climb into the thousands. Lydia went door to door, spinning tales about how my panels were tanking property values, how I was some rogue tearing apart the fabric of Pinewood Estates. A few neighbors gave me dirty looks. Mrs. Delaney even muttered something about hippies under her breath, but most just rolled their eyes when Lydia wasn't looking. They hated the HOA too. They just didn't have the guts to say it. Then she crossed a line. One crisp January morning, I woke to a racket outside, metal clanging, boots thudding. I yanked open the curtains and saw two guys in coveralls on my lawn, one hauling a ladder toward my roof, a drill in his hand. Lydia stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, grinning like a cat with a cornered mouse. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, storming out in my bathrobe. "Enforcing compliance," she said, holding up a stack of HOA papers. "It's in the bylaws. You've had your chance." I stepped closer, voice low so the workers couldn't hear. "You're trespassing, Lydia. Touch my roof, and you'll regret it." She scoffed, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She didn't know what I was capable of, not yet. I waved the workers off, and they hesitated, looking to her for direction. "Go on, get out of here," I said. They grabbed their gear and bolted, leaving Lydia fuming. That night, I made a call. A quiet one, to a friend at Pinewood Power. "Cut the grid to Pinewood Estates," I said. "All of it, except my address." He didn't ask questions. He knew who signed his checks. By 9 p.m., the neighborhood went dark, and my house lit up the street like a flare. Lydia's voice echoed from her porch, shrill and desperate. I stepped outside, leaning against my railing, and watched her world start to crumble. The blackout hit Pinewood Estates like a thunderclap, sudden and absolute. Streetlights winked out, TVs went dead, and the hum of modern life vanished into silence. My house stood alone, a glowing island in the dark, powered by the solar panels Lydia hated so much. I sipped a beer on my porch, watching the chaos unfold. Neighbors stumbled outside, flashlights bobbing, voices rising in confusion. Across the street, Lydia Harper was a pink-robed fury, her flashlight beams slashing through the night as she screamed into her phone. "What's going on? Where's the power?" Her voice cracked, sharp enough to wake the dead. I didn't answer, not yet. I just watched, letting her stew. The crowd grew, spilling onto lawns and sidewalks, their murmurs turning to complaints. Tom Reynolds, the guy with the flamingo statue, shuffled over in slippers, scratching his head. "Nathan, why's your place still lit up?" I shrugged, casual as could be. "Solar panels, Tom. Guess they're good for something." Lydia whirled toward me, her beam landing on my face like a spotlight. "Did you do this?" she demanded, storming across the street, robe flapping. "Not directly," I said, taking another sip. "But I might have had a word with the power company." Her eyes narrowed, lips curling into a snarl. "Turn it back on." "Not up to me," I said, leaning back. "You'd have to talk to Pinewood Power." "Oh, wait, did I forget to mention? I own it." The gasp that rippled through the crowd was worth every penny I'd spent on those panels. Lydia's face went slack, her flashlight dipping as the words sank in. "You what?" "Majority stakeholder," I said, grinning. "Funny how that works." Tom let out a low whistle. "So the guy you've been hassling owns the grid we're all plugged into? That's a twist." Lydia's mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping for air. "This is ridiculous. You can't cut off an entire neighborhood out of spite." "Spite?" I raised an eyebrow. No. This is a clerical issue. See, the HOA's supposed to pay maintenance fees for power distribution. But funny thing, those payments haven't been coming through. Certified mail fees add up, I guess. Her fists clenched, knuckles white against the flashlight. You can't hold us hostage. Hostage? I laughed. That's exactly how I felt when your goons tried to drill my panels off my roof this morning. The crowd shifted, eyes flicking between us. Some were whispering now, piecing it together. They'd lived under Lydia's thumb for years. Fines for crooked mailboxes, warnings for overgrown grass. And here she was, floundering. A woman 2 houses down, Clara, piped up. Wait, if the HOA paid its bills, this wouldn't have happened. Exactly, I said, nodding. But Lydia's been too busy policing my roof to handle the basics. Laughter broke out, sharp and unexpected. Lydia's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen since her last tantrum over Tom's flamingo. This is a misunderstanding, she snapped, hands up like she could wave it all away. We'll fix it soon. Sure you will, I said, crossing my arms. But here's the deal, my panels stay. No fines, no threats, no HOA nonsense. That's the price for lights. That's blackmail, she shrieked. Nope, I said, calm as ever. Negotiation. Something you never bothered with. She looked around, desperate for support, but the board members hung back, shadows in the dark. The neighbors weren't rallying to her side either. Tom muttered, about time someone stood up to her, and others nodded. Lydia's reign was cracking, and she knew it. Fine, she spat, voice trembling. Keep your stupid panels. Fantastic, I said, clapping my hands. I'll call the company. Power's back by morning. The crowd sighed, relieved but restless. Lydia turned on her heel, stomping back to her house, the door slamming behind her. I stayed on my porch, watching the night settle. The power clicked on at 6 a.m., right on schedule, streetlights buzzing, AC units whirring. But something else had shifted too. The way people looked at Lydia wasn't the same. The fear, the deference, it was fading. She'd lost a battle, and I'd just begun to fight. 2 days after the blackout, Lydia came knocking. Not the polite tap of a neighbor, but a hammering that rattled my door like she was auditioning for a SWAT team. I sighed, already knowing who it was. I opened the door to find her standing there, smug as a cat with a canary, next to a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard. Good morning, Nathan, she chirped, her voice a syrupy venom. I hope you've been enjoying your solar panels. What do you want, Lydia? I asked, crossing my arms. She gestured to the suit. This is Mr. Alan Carter from the zoning department. We've had an anonymous complaint about your panels. He's here to inspect. I couldn't help but smile. She thought she'd found a new angle, city rules instead of HOA bylaws. Go right ahead, I said, stepping aside. Carter cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. Sir, we're checking for potential zoning violations. Just routine. Take your time, I said, leaning against the frame. Lydia's eyes gleamed, triumphant. She figured I'd argue, resist, give her something to twist. When I didn't, Carter hesitated, then got to work, measuring, scribbling, climbing a ladder to check angles. Lydia stood beside me, smirking. Impressive, I said, glancing at her. Lose one fight and jump straight into another. That's dedication. Nothing personal, she said, her smirk widening. I just care about this community's integrity. Right? I chuckled. You're a real saint. Carter finished 20 minutes later, flipping through his notes. Lydia leaned in, practically salivating. Well, she asked. Everything's fine, he said, glancing between us. No violations. In fact, this setup's one of the best I've seen, efficient, well-placed. Lydia blinked. What? No issues, Carter repeated. I checked twice. I grinned. Well, Lydia, looks like you wasted his time. But hey, good effort. Her face went scarlet, a volcano ready to blow. Are you sure? She hissed at Carter. Maybe you missed something. He gave her a look, exasperated, done. I didn't. It's clean. With a nod to me, he left, escaping the awkwardness. Lydia opened her mouth, then shut it, storming off muttering curses. I figured that'd be the end of it. I was wrong. Later that week, a flyer hit every mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting. Topic: retroactive fines for visual harmony violations. I laughed when I read it. She was desperate, clawing for control. The meeting was set for Friday night at the community center, and word spread fast. By the time I arrived, the room was packed, more people than I'd ever seen at one of these things. Lydia stood at the front, trying to project her usual authority, but her hands trembled slightly. Thank you for coming, she began, forcing a smile. We're here to discuss an ongoing violation that threatens our property values. I raised my hand. Quick question, Lydia. What happened to the power maintenance fund? Her jaw tightened. That's not relevant. I think it is, I said, turning to the crowd. This isn't about panels. It's about control. She's been running this place like a dictator for years. Tom Reynolds stood up. Yeah, I'm sick of it. Fines for my flamingo, rules about my grass. Time we did something. Lydia's eyes widened. You can't just. I second that, Clara called out. Let's dissolve the HOA. The room erupted, voices overlapping, grievances airing. Lydia's kingdom was crumbling, and she couldn't stop it. The community center buzzed like a kicked hive, every seat taken, every whisper sharp with rebellion. Lydia Harper stood at the podium, her voice tight as she tried to hold the line. We're here to address Nathan Brooks' violation. What about the power fund? I cut in, standing. Where'd that money go, Lydia? She froze, eyes darting. That's not the issue. It's exactly the issue, I said, facing the crowd. She's been fining us for years. Mailboxes, flower pots, my panels. But when it comes to keeping the lights on, she drops the ball. Tom Reynolds jumped up, his voice booming. I'm done with this crap. Fine for my flamingo, my grass. Let's dissolve the HOA. Clara stood too. Seconded. Hands shot up, voices roared, and in 10 minutes, it was over. The vote passed, overwhelmingly. The HOA was dead. Lydia sat, pale and silent, her empire dust. I nodded at her as I passed. Lost your power, huh? Weeks later, her house went up for sale. No one bid. Her reputation tanked the value. So I bought it, dirt cheap, and slapped solar panels on it, turning it into a community hub. Her legacy became my victory. Pinewood Estates hummed with life again. No fines, no rules, just neighbors free to breathe. My old house and Lydia's former one glowed with solar power, a middle finger to her reign. Tom built a wind turbine. No flamingos this time, grinning like a kid. A letter from Lydia arrived one day, bitter and irrelevant, saying she'd started over somewhere else. Good riddance. I sat on my porch, watching the sunset, panels gleaming. The neighborhood was mine now, not to rule, but to free. The sun sets fast on some, I thought. For me, it was just rising.